Hello, everyone. Welcome. While we wait for more people to join us, I'd like to introduce myself and give a bit of an agenda for today's session. I'm Leila Oliveira, one of the scouting managers at Antler, and joining me today is James McClary, one of our general partners. It is the first time that we're hosting this session publicly. Normally, it's part of our cohort, and especially for the first 2 weeks of it, we focus a lot on the idea and the problem that you're trying to solve. A lot of people already have ideas when they come on board. Some of us come with a list of them, but then we actually validate if this is a good idea from a VC background. How can we validate that? How can we test if people will be willing to pay for your solution? So today we're a taste of what the cohort actually looks like. If you haven't applied yet, I'll leave a link here so you can do it today. The next cohort starts in February in Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane. Any questions, just write here on the box or just send me a message on LinkedIn and I'll answer everybody today. Well, without further ado, James, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone, and thanks for spending your lunchtime with us. So what we'll do is I'll go through first just a brief intro to Antler for those of you that are less familiar with who we are, what we do. Then we spend the bulk of the time, as they say, like this is one of the sessions. This is actually my favorite session to get into in the program. We'll talk about what we see as ways to build great ideas, and also I will have give you a set of ideas that we see so often that the bar for being successful in that is almost unfathomably high. I'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end. So probably be about 5 minutes intro to Antler. I reckon probably like 15, 20 minutes around presentation. But then I really want to hear your questions either on Antler, how to build a great business and anything there. So we'll leave plenty of time for that. With that as the setup, let's get into it. So who are we? So we're the foremost early stage investor globally. We never say you're too early for us. We may say you're not good enough. That's a different matter. But in Australia alone, we've had more than 1,000 founders come through the doors of the cohort. We've invested in over 300, and we're proudly in 3 locations, with Brisbane kicking off for our first official residency next month, joining Sydney and Melbourne from 2019 and 2020. If you look at Antler is a global organization. Also, there's some good numbers on the side there, which change each time I present it. But I think the most important takeaway for you all as Australian-based founders looking to build a generational company is this global network helps you to unlock international capital, international employees, and international customers through the networks that we already have. If we've invested in 1,200 companies, particularly for those of you in the SaaS space, there's 1,200 potential customers there. Plus, we've seen a real trend of successful businesses raising money from non-Australian investors sooner rather than later. Who is the Australia team and who will you be working with? So, the key thing here is that we have all become investors. Our backgrounds are all either entrepreneurs, early stage at various businesses, or founders ourselves. So, from the partnership group, we've got founder of Lazada Indonesia, which sold for $1 billion to Alibaba. Mike was second employee in Asia for Uber and founded and exited his own business to an ASX listed company. I've taken C-level roles at a bunch of VC-backed companies, including being like GM at early stage for Airbnb and Google. We also have a fantastic set of venture partners, including people that run their own VC fund, exit entrepreneurs for 10 figures, people who active investors and driving things forward. So we're here to both be a sounding board for ideas because we know what it's like to go from 0 to 1 and 1 to 10. But also we know that at the earliest stage, it's the people that you're involved with that are most important. And the time for spreadsheet investing comes much, much later. And that's not what we're in here for. This is the favorite bit where I get to talk about particular founders. On the right, you can see what this often looks like with places where people come from. Typically, it's a more seasoned, someone that's seen something in their career with an average of 11 years of work experience. We aim for a pretty balanced set between people who are on the sort of commercial, operational, marketing side, and then the more tech domain, which kind of makes sense if you're going to have the classic two-person founding team. One person's going to build it and one person's going to sell it. I'll take just a couple of examples here. So let's talk about Tim in the bottom left here. So this is Factory AI, is predictive analytics for a factory machinery. So if you're Bega or Arnott's and you're running a big factory, you probably want to know if conveyor belt 7 is going to blow up soon. He came in looking to take his expertise in seeing this done in automotive and place it somewhere else. He met now CEO JP in the program, who'd had a background in like selling SaaS, but actually had sold to site managers. And now they're one of our more successful businesses, moving strongly at seed stage. I could talk about all of these people at length, but in interest of time, I'll move on. But I think we can talk about the backgrounds of people, but ultimately it's typically three kind of archetypes that fall into. There's the tech product builders, there's the business and operators, and then there's the domain experts. And you should think of the domain experts as if there's 5 people in the world that know something about a particular area, that's one of these people. So a couple of others that have been successful in a kind of like Series A stage, valued in sort of getting towards 100 million Aussie. Path Zero is a platform for asset managers to understand the Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions of their portfolio and to communicate those insights to better aid ESG investing. And then I shared Zalient, which is because it's a deep tech business and not a classic software, to highlight, we end up going in because of the nature of our residency, we go into weird and wonderful ends of the internet. So Zalient's a business that it allows you to do image processing on the edge on chips. So if you were at a Ring doorbell and you wanted to be able to understand who is at the door without having to query up to the cloud, Zalient's technology would allow you to do this. We've made plenty of other investments on the right, like it's a who's who of Australia and some international VCs as to who else is invested like in our businesses. And I show this one to show that this is also like, this gives you an idea of the breadth of where we go. So because we spend 10 weeks day in, day out alongside you, this means we get into areas that many other VCs will fear to tread. So Web3, hardware, med tech, things that can take like years to gestation. We're comfortable in if we believe in the founders long enough. Don't get me wrong, like top left, I love a good bit of B2B SaaS like any good investor, but I think for places where you're looking for people to take a risk on non-traditional models, if we believe, as long as we believe there's a VC scale, we have the ability to move into those. What happens during the program? So it's roughly split to the left-hand side is the Antler residency. You should think about that as 10 weeks. You should think about the right-hand side, Antler portfolio company, an up to 10-year kind of like journey where we're super successful. I'll talk about most importantly, the residency is split into 2 main areas. One's formation and validations. This is co-founders matching, joining together, exploring ideas, validating. When we have a complementary co-founding team, go with an unfair advantage, going after spaces as VC backable. All of these concepts I'll talk about in the Antler view of ideas in a sec. We move them into the due diligence phase, which is where you spend dedicated time with a coach over a 5-week period. Could be me, could be one of the other partners, but we're here to get you as investment ready as possible, which culminates with the investment committee. Then assuming we invest, it's like this next stage, this next 12 months is the most important, that we're heavily involved. So we know as the sole investor and the one that typically, like with the more fundraising experience than the founders, we need to pull our weight and help drive those bits of businesses. And what really is important, I'll talk about in this follow-on investment, is what we've recently instituted, which is the agreement for rolling capital. That we know that from our global data, if within the first 12 months, a business raises more than 250k USD, so let's call it 400k Aussie in the first 12 months, they've got a pretty much near 50% Series A success rate. To put that in context, Y Combinator, who are probably the best in the business in terms of like early stage, they get like a early 20s rate. That means we've instituted this to stack the deck in your favor to get to this, that if you secure minimum 300k Aussie in the first 12 months, we'll match 50% of the committed capital. The other way to think about it, if you're looking to raise 1.5 million, we're committed for 500k subject to you finding other lead investors there. So that means you've got a really strong position to be able to start fundraising, and rather than starting from zero, you're starting from a third set. And we've seen this has disproportionately made a big difference to the last 12 months since we've instituted it. Then the other piece is we're not just like 1 or 2 checks. All being well, Antler would be in fresh capital invested into your business up to including Series C. How we do that is we have a global follow-on fund that goes from Series A to C. They take the winners out of the individual, Antler locations. They invest up to US 10 mil checks, fund size about 300 mil US. And so this is both a source of capital, but also we found that through this process, we've actually been able to make introductions to lead investors from outside of Australia to help drive things through. And we found that of the last 5 or 6 large seeds or Series A's that we've done, 5 of them have been led by international investors, and 4 of them, the introduction came from somewhere in the Antler network in order to make things happen. So I say, although we're talking about things at day zero, like we will be a part of like fresh capital coming in for certainly that first 5 years and likely further on. That's a quick overview of Antler. I won't pause for questions at this stage. I'll just get into the ideas, and then we'll cover all the questions at the end. So, what makes a great idea? And firstly, what is a startup? So there's many ways you can, depending on how much you're on LinkedIn, there's a bunch of tropes around what's important, what's not. Many large companies style themselves as startups. My favorite definition is actually this one, where it's an experiment to prove a non-obvious hypothesis. The reason why I like this is there's the notion of experiment, that we are trying things based on a hypothesis to work out what makes sense and what doesn't, and that the hypothesis that we have is not obvious. The reason, if it was obvious, then everyone else would be doing it. There probably isn't much alpha in some of the venture opportunities there. So this is probably my favorite way to frame, in a bit of a more intellectual sense, but actually in what the component parts of a great startup are. It's an experiment to prove a non-obvious hypothesis. The other way to think about it is it's about growth. It's designed to grow fast, and that's what the VC model is looking for, is that there is a big pot of gold at the end of this, and there's the ability to scale, and that there's the need to scale via fresh injections of capital. So when you get to those hypothesis pieces, there's really 3, you can boil it down to 3 areas. What's the problem? What's the solution? And why are you the people to be able to do it? Spoiler alert, the third one's the most important, but let's go through them in turn. And this is one that I'm a big fan of, from the co-founder of Waze, the mapping system bought by Google. Fall in love with the problem, not the solution. The reason why this is important is that, all being well, this is going to be like a 5 to 10 year journey, maybe more. If you're just interested in kind of the feature and the product, that is unlikely to sustain you and if I see you in a random Thursday at 7 p.m. 3 years from now, if you don't have a real affinity and desire to solve the overarching problem that you've got, on that 3 years, Thursday, 7 p.m. from now, you're probably going to feel like you're pushing something uphill rather than doing your life's work. So I think that problem is really important, as much from validation, understanding, and the ferocity of it, but arguably more for the value that you personally will derive from being a part of this and your motivation. But if we take this as the more intellectual side of the problem, this is an iterative process. But if you have an observed problem, you're able to frame it and then unpick the sub problems or the hypotheses causing that problem. With research, this can lead you to solutions, which then you can start the process again of hypothesis, sense check, look to validate here. And it's actually this iterative process that enables you to get a better understanding of the problem before you then move to the solution. The ways in which you can see some of these problems, they largely fall into 2 categories. There's one on the kind of the organic stuff that you are seeing in your career, in your daily life, in that you've seen that there's something that works in one particular area, but why hasn't it been applied to another? That's the more organic sense and comes from your experience, life experience, what you've done in your career. And then there's the more deliberate way of really taking either design thinking principles or taking a deep dive into a particular industry or area and trying to see where are some missing gaps to be able to fit. One's not better than the other, and often taking things from a combination of both sides can serve, but these are typically the ways in which the ideation process can kind of kick off and start. And then when we get into where some of these potential solutions can come from and what's causing the problems, you can normally categorize things into one of these 5 categories. So it's tinkering, which is just you've seen a problem over a various period and spending multiple iterations in order to fix it. There's a new geography, so seeing what happens well in one market and applying it well there. Rocket Internet made an entire ecosystem and business around this. There's the application of old to new. So taking something that works in one product or service to a new industry. Good example would be the one I shared earlier, Factory AI, that came from applying something from the automotive industry into the food and beverage manufacturing industry. There's building blocks of macro trends. So you could call this like the picks and shovels. So this is the infrastructure that goes around something. So for example, you could say with the rise of cloud computing over the last 10, 15 years, there have been many businesses that have been built on managing that spend or being able to deploy infrastructure quickly, etc. And then the last one, which people think is the most likely, but actually ends up being the smallest category, is the genuine, all right, this is something which no one has really considered or thought of before. Then probably like more importantly is like, what does a good problem to solve look like? So there's a few areas here which I won't read through, but my non-PhD statistically significant like hypothesis is you need a minimum of two of these to have a problem that's genuinely worth solving. That if you only have something that's popular but isn't growing, urgent, or painful, you're probably not going to have like enough of a business. If you've got something that's painful but never happens, you're also unlikely to have a problem that's really rich enough and deep enough to go in. A good framework to use is to actually try and like measure out some of these, and not that if you have 7 out of 7 it's better than 4 out of 7, but sorry, 6. If you've got a couple of these and you can really feel there's a depth and a ferocity to the problem being felt, this is where some of the most exciting space to ideate exists within. So like then, hey, look, what does research look like? Yeah, I'm not telling you that you need to go to Google or your LLM of choice to doing it, but one thing I always highlight is, given the likelihood that this is a genuine white space, no one's ever thought this idea is near zero, have a look at where failures have been in this space before. You can learn a lot from failures that come in. Where on the right-hand side, like desk research is a complete commodity. What does primary research look like? An example of this from one of the businesses that we invested in, it's a company called Sapien, which is male fertility. So they enable at-home sperm tests to be done rather than having to do it in a clinic. Like the way in which they manage their customer validation was, this was 2021, so during 2020, 2021, during the severe lockdowns in Melbourne. In order to go to IVF clinics, it was outside the restricted area. So the co-founders, they actually signed up as Uber drivers and stationed themselves outside of those IVF clinics in order to get people who are finishing their shifts or customers who are going to IVF clinics to be able to do their research. That's an example of how like a non-obvious way that you can get custom validation in a way that's pretty proprietary. Obviously, there's some other ones here using on LinkedIn networks, etc. But I think like don't just rely on secondary. Get in and really work out what does the primary view of this look like. Now onto the solution. What does things look like? So typically the kind of the T shape of how you're going to build a business works for many scenarios. So the stroke of the downward stroke of the T is that initial niche when you're going to grow, and then as you scale and move on, you'll add more elements like along the T. So a simplified example would be Google. Their initial stroke downwards was organizing the world's information, solving search for early internet adopters. Over a period, then like it was the monetization of that and dominating search that became important. Then probably from the creation of Alphabet with a bunch of acquisitions and other things they made over the time, then search is just the starting point to all the other things that they have in the suite, and that many of these are now standalone businesses which are creating their own Ts. This is a decent heuristic of how you can both work with that cognitive dissonance of how do I build something that there's 100 people are going to love, but also how do I have the story that means I can get to the size of business that demands or warrants VC backability. The last bit is like the why you, and like this is the most important. So our assumption is like for whatever you come up with, there's at least into the double figures of teams going after it, and most likely there's hundreds of people who are in and around this problem. Therefore, what makes you almost like a priori one of the best teams, ideally in the top 1 or top 5 teams, to be able to go after that anywhere in the world? That's like your unfair advantage. This unfair advantage can come in a few different ways. You don't necessarily need all of these, but again, if you've got none of these, I would, or arguably one, I would question whether this is the solution, the place to go. So at this early stage, where we're at of inception, pre-seed, this is the most important, like the founding team. And I said, this is there's quite a high bar to this. If I take like so my experience, like that, I've worked and run like sales organizations in SaaS businesses. That probably doesn't mean I've got a real unfair advantage in building a SaaS business. There's many of you on the call here will be equally, if not better skilled than me in that. And there'll be literally like six figures of people in the world that can do it. What I've done, to take an example, is like I've been a part of opening more than 50 markets globally, worldwide. That probably means I'm one of the few people who's got a really nuanced view of what it takes to launch markets in every single continent in the world. That's an example of like where this bar of unfair advantage, you should set it pretty high that you can genuinely think. The other way to think about it is if a conference is being thrown on this particular topic, are you one of the people that probably gets a call to speak? If yes, we're in business. If no, think again. Then like the product. So like there's not necessarily that the whole product, particularly at stage, needs to be demonstrably better than what else is out there, but the core feature that you're building this thing around needs to mean that people are confident that they're going to take some like ropey stuff elsewhere in order to drive their feature better. Again, people can catch up with this, but this is an advantage which it has a distinct point of view and probably comes from your non-obvious hypothesis earlier on. There's actually like you can have a product which is good but not necessarily wildly different to others, but you've got a real acquisition pathway. This can be from your hysteric network. This can be from the social following you may have. This may come from the things that you have seen in your skills and career, but that having a differentiated way that you can be successful where others can't at an early stage. Again, like, this is ones that will have to evolve over time. But in that first 12 months, if you've got a way that you can look to acquire your first customers from people who are already in your network or your sphere, you're demonstrably higher likelihood of success than someone who doesn't. And then the last, which this is more probably like a Series A type question, but what is the moat that kind of is a compounding effect? So think of like things like network effects that in order to go into, I won't dwell on this one too much because at the stage we're at, this is something that comes later. It's more of like, what are the routes that your moat could be in the future that becomes exciting? So then like how to validate some of these. So this is if I had to just get this down to like a one pager of how to work out an idea as VC backable, on first, sense check that demand against those 6 criteria of problem. Second, to work out, is this of a VC backable size? Just do as simplistic a market exercise as you can of just what's the potential revenue you could get to in a given year. And like, again, it's going to be blunt, but my one watch out of this is if it comes down to you needing to get 80% of a market to get to, let's say, like 100 million of revenue after a few years, then that's a big challenge. Because, for example, if you think of one of the more famous duopolies in Australia of like Woolies and Coles, Woolies has actually only got about 30% of market share. Or another one of, if you think of Airbnb of being relatively synonymous with home sharing, whether vacation rental or individual properties, their share of this, so that's excluding hotels and other stuff, it's only like 20-25%. So I would have a high skepticism of you saying you can have more than 20% of the market. And then the right hand side is reassess it against some of the kind of criteria that people are looking for, which is in the team, they're unfair advantaged, the product in like the differentiation that exists, and then lastly, like the actual business dynamics, like what's the why now, what are the risks, how scalable is this, how feasible is this at present. This one's my favorite slide, and often the most controversial, and the one which provokes the most question is there's a set of ideas I call commoditized, which is ones where the problem is obvious to thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. The risk of those is the bar to succeed there is so high because so many people have a view of the problem. Please don't misunderstand me. This doesn't mean that there are not successful companies, there won't be successful companies, and even that we've invested in businesses that fulfill some of these examples, let's say like carbon accounting, AI powered marketing, but that the bar is really high for these, and these are the ones that without you being able to really show me that you're one of the 5 people in the world to be able to do it, my recommendation would be that you should consider other areas. I won't go through each of these, but I'll give a couple of examples as to why we've seen these being challenging. So let's say SMB integrated dashboard. So you're a small business owner, you've got Xero, you've got some sort of CRM. It's actually quite difficult to move between all these things to actually see what you should be doing and giving you data-driven insights. Sounds quite feasible and quite sensible. The real challenges come in 3 main formats. One of what actually is the insight that is driven off a small business's books, which doesn't end up being a glorified version of sell more or cut some cost. So there's actually like, how do you solve the problem? The second challenge in this is, why does anyone actually have the money or care enough to have another thing to be able to do that people actually have been able to manage relatively okay with what happens? So the ferocity of the problem isn't there. And then the third is selling to SMBs when it's pretty generic or it's a big category like restaurants. How to do that at scale requires a high amount of skill, background, expertise, and setup. So that's an example why I see many, and I would say I probably see 20 of these a year just in Australia, that they're the barriers there. What's another one I should choose? All right, so a better way of doing performance reviews. Like, this is commoditized because typically if you are kind of mid into your career, you've managed a team, and doing performance reviews is annoying, it's difficult, blah, blah, blah. It's not that high value. The real challenge with this is who's going to buy this, and why is this an actual standalone project rather than just a feature for everyone else, like a work day, like a culture round, like an etc. And that, how do you actually, the challenge with performance reviews is less about the tech, it's actually about the manager and the employee in general. So these are ones where we've seen, again, this one I've seen literally like 30 times a year, and it is, again, it's well-meaning, and yes, it would be helpful, but I've not seen a compelling enough argument as to why this is something that should get backing. I can happily talk about any of these, and I'll happily dig into any of them more in the questions. So just like as a takeaways, and then I'll take over 2 questions. Is like, so is it a real problem? A risk is you've got a problem that's kind of like a bit painful, a bit urgent, a bit something. Like, really push hard to find the thing that's really annoying for people, really painful, really urgent, growing. Secondly, and most importantly, why on earth you? What's your right to play? What's your right to win in this versus the people in another city, in another market who are looking to do something similar? And then lastly, like, does this have like venture scale around it? So look at market size, assess against some of those VC criteria. So with that, I will open for questions. So please, like, raise the Zoom hand or handle stuff in the chat, and let me just bring myself off the screen share so I can.
Thank you, James. We already got a few questions, so I'm just gonna go ahead with that for now. Sam is asking in which phase of the ID expansion we can join Antler.
So, I mean, there are probably, I would say, 20 to 25% of the businesses that we invest in out of each given cohort are actually like created within the residency. So that means there's nothing which is almost too soon, and we're prepared to take gambles later on. I say that if you've been working on this for more than 6 to 12 months, I would argue you're arguably not moving fast enough to warrant VC investment. In between that, there's not really a requirement, yes or no. But I think what we're aiming for is, so we're not trying to invest that everyone has reached a similar stage. It's more we're investing based on trajectory, and trajectory can come in 3 weeks, can come in 5 weeks, can come in like 5 months. But that's the trajectory that's most important, more so than milestone like MVP built, yes, no, first customer, yes, no.
Cool. Next question is from Rajan. I'm working on an idea SaaS base which has been implemented 50% and not yet released to the market. Do you reckon it's possible to join Antler now and validate my idea, or is best to release the product first and then reach out?
Good stuff, Rajan, and great to see you after our chat on LinkedIn over the last couple of days. But because of the answer to the previous question, that we're pretty comfortable at what stage things move in. Like we don't need unlike many VCs where it's like you need to have a working product, you need to have customers in before that. Don't even talk to us. By the way, unless you've raised 100 million before, and then all rules are different. Like we're actually here for whatever stage goes in. So I would say apply, look to join, and we can be of big assistance during that validation process rather than feeling like you need to wait till there's a particular milestone.
Amazing. Thank you.
Good stuff. All right, then we've got Carlos. Why not AI powered marketing for SMBs? So there's one of like the SMB problem that I talked about in the dashboards of, all right, what SMBs? How do you actually reach them? What size? What do they need for marketing? Do they have a marketing person that you're trying to sell to? Are you trying to replace a marketing person? There's these like nature pieces there. And then the other piece is if you're looking to do this all in one spot to do every bit of marketing for SMBs, I would argue that there are point solutions that are better at every single stage of the process that you could choose. Like if the main problem is around generating content, there are a multitude of VC-backed AI businesses there. If you're looking to do creative, like genuine creative, like creative advertising, again, I can think of 5 off the top of my head already that do that. If you're looking to do analytics, they're there. I mean, we've recently invested in a business which is doing the more like market research style, like Hall and Partners, GFK type stuff at scale for businesses. So like, I'm not saying AI powered marketing does not work. I'm saying that the number of pictures I've seen, which is AI powered marketing for SMB, is so high that the bar then ends up being very high, that unless you have a very nuanced point of view or you genuinely think you're one of the 5 people to go solve this, you either need to like niche down considerably or consider something else.
Thank you, James. My question was more about, I know there's plenty of other tools that are specific for every aspect of the operation of SMBs, but I was thinking more about strategic support and so strategic aspects of small businesses, that because they don't have access to like, consultants or potentially having a marketing manager or anything else. So that's why I was thinking AI strategy for marketing.
And at the risk of making this an individual idea validation, the challenge here is what's your insight around how you acquire customers at scale? Because the problem is you're trying to sell something that's effectively a service in a product. It is hard to do a product-led sale of this. Typically, the amount that you can get from an individual SMB from this should be a marketing-led sale, but the nature of the product you are trying to sell often means it's actual like direct sale. That means the scale aspect that you need to be successful doesn't really work out in the longer term, unless, going back to what I talked about in some ones, that you have a network, which means that you can get the first 2,000 customers because of what you've done before. So I said that there's always exceptions to this, but that this is the challenge in this. Like I would actually typically, when you hear AI powered X for SMB, my like pattern recognition goes, make it more specific in the AI, and what would it look like to sell to mid-market or higher.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Cool. Like we've got plenty in the chat, and I will get through to those. But I just want to make sure that if people want to ask a live question, stick the Zoom hand up, and we'll get to it. So I'll whip through a couple of these whilst you're all working those out. George asked, what percentage does Antler take to initially fund a venture? Our standard fixed terms is 12%, 225k. So it's a post-money valuation of just about 1.9 mil Aussie. What about a dating app that solves common pain points present in similar apps? So we have backed dating apps. So like that's not necessarily a challenge. The bit here this falls into, this is a commoditized problem. Like millions of people experience challenges in how to do it and have a point of view. The main thing for you people is less about is the idea good? Like it may well be, what's your ability with the co-founding team you have to be successful where others aren't. Ming asked what's Antler's stance towards safes. In our initial round, we always do priced equity. The reason for that is to mean that given that the vast majority of businesses will actually be incorporated during Antler's residency, this means you don't have to spend lawyer fees on getting like shareholders agreement, constitution, all that other stuff done, because we've got those all set. We invest on safes in both our direct investing and in follow-on rounds. We don't believe one instrument is better than the other. It's what makes most sense at what stage. Fernando asked about fitness, wellness. Yeah, so this falls into the commoditized problem. Like millions of us want to get fit, millions see a bit of a problem. The challenge here is what I call the month 4 problem. So let's suppose you're charging someone $9.99 or $29.99 a month in order to have all this like great tracking. What's the thing that on month 4, when I get the notification saying that you've just taken the money out of my account, that I go, all right, that was actually worth it? That's the real challenge here. And just being a place to look and track at stuff sort of isn't enough. Like, what's the genuine insight that is there? And please don't say it's that everyone in the community encouraging each other, because that's a very valuable business, but that's a different thing. Like community driven something is different to just building a platform which aggregates stuff. Aaron asked, what's the appetite for AI startups in general? I mean, like, I guess the 2 answers to that. One is very happy, but the real answer is we don't have a quota for types of businesses we're trying to do. We're trying to find the best founders in Australia and back them. I literally don't care what industry you're in. I just want the best people who've got an unfair advantage to build a VC backable business. Certainly, like there is a predilection towards AI stuff in the moment, but I don't want my answer to feel that we are precluding others. So residency, Pfizer asked like residency deadline. So we start February 3rd. If you don't go for this one, the next one is in August. So it's like sort of 6 months gap. I would encourage you to get your application in by the end of next week to mean that we've got enough time to get everything up and down and through for Sydney. Zach, good to see you. Another LinkedIn chat coming into live. Can you join me and have a full-time job? No. Unfortunately, this is an important bit of friction that we do put in, and this isn't a judgment on people's financial situation or other things, but we know that for there to be, let's call it 70 people in a room who are looking to drive to build venture-backed the next generation of businesses, you need to look around that room and feel that everyone else is committed to this as you. That's why we ask for people to be all in and not to be doing this alongside your full-time job, because the risk is that even if we miss out on some people who do have what it takes, the number of tourists that we'll get who will just, when push comes to shove, retreat to their nice, safe corporate 9-to-5 job is too high. So this is kind of a deal breaker from our point of view. If you're not prepared to be full-time in the residency, then please wait until you can be ready and then give us a shout. Is Antler approachable and able to engage at any time, only during intake periods? Depends what you mean. Like, we run our residencies once every 6 months. So that's when the core bit of what happens go. Like, there are people who come into residency that we've known for 3 years. We've got someone coming to this current residency that we've known for 5 years. So like there's never a point that we're not around and not available. But it's just that our residencies, we find that we get the best quality of people by running in this and like building towards a crescendo versus trying to do things on a roll-on, roll-off basis.
James, I think he means if he can reach out to us as an investor afterwards. So after we invest, how he...
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. Oh, so sorry. In that case, I misunderstood. So yeah. So like we run a residency, and that is the most sort of intense bit of it. But otherwise, we are an investor, and we are someone here to make your business, maybe a part of making your business a success. So particularly in that first 12 months, we are like heavily involved, particularly around like the fundraising side. But the oldest of our businesses are 5 years old, and earlier on today, I was involved in being involved in like trying to help close the round that they're working on now. So those ones, it means we're not necessarily sitting in the same space day in, day out. But I think because we invest so early, and often we've seen founders and their businesses almost like, before they were big or before they were a thing. We end up having a slightly different relationship than other investors, because it's a bit like, being friends with someone you grew up with in high school versus someone that you've only met later in life. We've got slightly that business because we're there at often like the birth of the business, so you can kind of consider us your primary school friend going through. All right, Jack asks, tips for finding additional members of a founding team with people outside of my current network. Man, like, I'll give you $5 afterwards. That's one of the reasons why we exist. If you think of the challenges of building a generational business, it's finding the right people to do so. That's why we're here to look to curate 70 or so people 2 times a year to bring together to give you that answer, to give you that opportunity. I'll give you an answer taking the Antler sales hat off. Then this is actually like looking at networks. So like the Y Combinator like matching board is a good place. There's a bunch of, depending on what area you're in, like Slack communities, etc., groups where you can find like-minded people. Places like Build Club, Blackbird Giants. There's a great sort of set of areas there, but that's sort of an initial starting point. Theodore asks, how early is too early? No, there's no time that's too early. Like I said before, I reckon 25% of the businesses we invest in, if you spoke to the founders on day one, they would not have guessed what they were about to do. So that means we are comfortable taking risks at any point, as long as the founders are good enough. So please don't have stage as something you're holding back on. Let's get in and help and talk. Sophie asked about contacts and mentors for health tech, device design and manufacturing. One of the benefits of our global platform and for transparency, this is post-investment. We have a curated list of, like, we call it our operator network. It's 600 people globally. There's no fee. No one's getting paid for anything, but they give over like an hour a month of their time, bookable on an office hours basis. This is active experts in any given area. And I have not found a business we've backed yet that hasn't been able to find someone useful in the particular space. And in health tech, I know specifically because we've worked in a couple of these bits before, that there are specific people with like supply chain expertise in health tech that exist in that. Rashid asked, what if you're one of the 5 people to sort out a global problem? You are in the right place, my friend. Let's talk and let's get going. Mateus asks, how many companies are selected each cohort? So again, like, we have no quota, and I say this on like day one. If everything's amazing, we've got the funds to invest in all. If everything's crap, we're not investing in anything. I think that this is actually quite an important point, that this is one of those few scenarios where there's not a zero sum to success. And by that, I mean, your success doesn't mean someone else has a lower chance of success, and like vice versa. So, but to give you an idea of an average cohort, it's somewhere between like 8 to 11 businesses typically. So it's probably like 8 or 9 would probably be the most likely if I had to bet on how many people get set up. For 2020, Josh asked 2025, what are the most investable industries, niches, ideas? I mean, YC do a request for startups because they're trying to find businesses. We don't have a request for startups because we're trying to find individuals to be a part of creating it. There are plenty of. I mean, I think last year actually I wrote like his 10 problems that I would like to see solved. But that's my point of view. Things I'm personally interested in and excited about. I actually think stable coin, and applications of blockchain beyond into other industries. I am also excited about, let's call it anti-AI. So what's the equivalent of being organically produced versus mass produced? I think those are sort of a couple of topical and interesting areas to go after. But like, I'm making my career on investing across areas that I'm not necessarily a domain expert in. What we're looking for is, and this is why we run a program 10 weeks to be able to get a chance to be with you day in, day out, is how to see spaces that we may not know personally and overcome those biases we may have, but how we can believe that you're one of the 5 people to go solve a particular problem, and that's something to be able to go after. All right, how am I doing? So Ming, you asked, you were talking to A16Z insight into some others, you're exploring options and terms, what's the best way to get in touch? Look, we're here, you know where we are. Like come talk afterwards. Peter, should you then get backed by the VC? Oh, okay, all right, yeah. Peter, I really appreciate you asking. What's the awkward question around this? So the there are many investors who think you shouldn't take a salary. We disagree. We want every founder to take a salary. But if I tell you what the reality looks like, the majority of founders in the first year, their salary will be, I would say, like within a range of 4 to 8K per month, excluding super. Again, every circumstance is different. There are some which are lower, there are some which are higher. But my advice to anyone considering this is, if the prospect of a sub 100K salary over the next 18 months to 2 years means you do not believe you will have the financial scenario to be able to handle that, then I think you should consider what your options are to get to that stage. Like I said, I'm not making any judgments of what people should be doing in their finances or others, but that's the reality. So if you feel that sub 100K is not going to allow you to live the life you need to be able to, then you are likely to be in a challenge where this is not the right time for you in this particular scenario. As no one needs to do a dedicated financial plan. We don't give a shit about that stuff or look at it. But I think my advice to anyone considering this is, you should be prepared that this is something that is going to be sub 6 figures for that first definitely year and arguably about 2 years.
Rachel always recommends as well, bring your partner to the conversation, talk to your family. Everybody has to be on board before you make a decision like that.
Yeah, there's time for lone wolfing. This is not time for lone wolfing if you have other people that depend on you and particularly like your income. Lara asks, can you tell us what financial products you back? I mean, well, like I said before, there's nothing. I don't have a box I'm trying to fit. I think fintechs that we have backed, who should talk about? So Reach Alternatives. So this is if you are a retail investor like most of us and you want access to big private equity or VC deals, like an A16Z fund or Insignia's next fund, you normally need a minimum of like 500K million check size to go in. The vast majority of us can't afford that. Reach Alternatives allows you to do fractional ownership of it. So for, I think it's like 5K individual minimum, they're able to roll it up into a position there. That's an example of a fintech that we've backed. And I could go on, but I want to get through the rest of the questions. But I guess the message here, Lara, is there's not something that you need to be in order for us to back, but that we are fintech is something we're perfectly happy to go after. Alex asks, do you recommend to reapply after progress from non-successful application? I think this is with progress, yes, but probably not otherwise. George asks, who can we talk to directly for investment? I mean, our application form is the best way in, and then things aren't quite set for residency, we can best triage it there. You're an intelligent guy, you know what my name and surname is. I'm sure you can find me online to work out how to do it. Peter asks, you've got the good ones here. With VCB achieved, what control will Antler have to use on service providers such as app builders, and will they be helping to find the best suited professionals? We don't ask for controls on this stuff. We believe you guys are smart and will make good decisions. But what I would say on this is that actually I would question why you're going to an outsourced developer unless it's something really trivial, not trivial as in unimportant, but kind of closed-ended like design or something else. The initial founding team should have the skills to get an MVP up and running. For helping to find professionals in a given area, whether it's legals or others, we've got a bank of people. Theodoros, man, I'm going to give you the same answer that I said before. I don't have a feeling about real tech, prop tech. But what I would steer you away from is the problem of how buying a house is expensive and stressful. You know that, I know that, everyone else sitting on this call knows that. Like, I think it's like, what's something that is a non-obvious either problem or a non-obvious view that you have within real estate or prop tech that you have a distinct advantage to be able to solve? Lara, who do you think is suitable for residency, characteristics, personal qualities, etc., etc.? I think there's two main things that we're trying to assess going through the process of application. Is one, spike, so that's kind of what is it that you may be one of the top 5 or also people in the world to go after. And this can be something really obvious, or it can be something like hidden and non-obvious. And then the second piece is around like founder DNA. So this is a combination of creative problem solving, leadership, grit, resilience, charisma, and that are if you look at it based on psychometrics, that are the leading indicators of unicorn founders, but also what it takes to go from 0 to 1. That the average person is someone who's like 10 years of experience means that the average is that you often end up building in an area that you have an expertise in. But like, there's not that you need to have done X in order to be successful and apply. We've backed teams like just out of university, and there's not like a limit on what we're looking to do, but it's more of what can you show us about that grit, resilience, and like pure founder DNA to mean that we can believe in both your vision, but also that you're the people over this next 5 to 10 years who will build a generational business. All right, we are getting towards time, so I'm going to make the last call for questions. I'm very happy to take a live one if someone wants to come off mute and whatever background and say something, or like go into the chat. I can handle an awkward silence longer than you guys can. Rashid, emergency management. I don't know if that was meant for another chat. I don't understand what you mean. Was that a Slack message for your organization?
I have a question. How do you remember every single founder that you talk to? I just don't understand. You remember they have conversations on LinkedIn, and I feel so bad because I can't.
Maybe you're doing more than I am, Leila. Peter asked, like, should you back, but instead of me being the one in control, can I nominate a replacement representative for myself in the business? I mean, short answer, no. I mean, I hate to be blunt on these ones, but like, I mean, so all right, a scenario where something like this could work is where you end up being an advisor to the business that exists, but then you're not the founder and you're not the person in the residency.
Hi, James. It's Chris here. I have a quick question
Go for it.
that I did put in the chat, but
Oh, sorry.
No,
Did I
no,
miss
that's
you?
okay.
Okay.
I'll just say it while I'm
No, thank
I'm
you.
speaking out. So I have a MVP product in the prop tech space that has just been completed with a small customer base. Is this something that would fit into the residency program if it's past an idea?
No, yeah. So like that there is things that you have like something live. That's not a barrier. So I think like this, we're not. I guess like to give a you specific answer, but also for everyone, like we are not fixed on what like stage you guys are at. What we're going to be judging is the scale and the trajectory on it. So it means that in a scenario where you're in residency, and look, I'm actually going to hold you to different standards to someone else who's only come up with the idea that they're working on like 2 weeks into the program. Like that's the reality. We're trying to see where the trajectory is, not where the starting point is.
That's great. Thank you. I understand.
Good stuff. Thanks, Chris, and thanks for making the live question.
Thank you.
All right, Sam. how can I get an update on the progress of application? I know with Antler earlier, if you can either put your full name in the chat or follow up with whoever you had an interview with, then we can work out where that application has gone. Thank you, Theodore. I appreciate the props. Cool with that. Like, this is a genuine last call for questions, and I won't have a vast awkward silence. So unless anyone's got anything in the next 10 seconds, we'll be shutting it down. Cool. Well, thanks everyone. This is a real pleasure. I look forward to seeing a whole bunch of you throughout the process, and look forward to seeing a whole bunch of you in person February 3rd. Thanks very much. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, James. Thanks, guys.